joined the Sit-In movement, a campaign against segregated lunch counters in Orangeburg, South Carolina. He then helped found the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1960 and took part in the 1961 Freedom Ride. In 1961, he was elected chairman of the SNCC and served in that capacity until 1964. SNCC was one of the organizations that helped desegregate facilities and register voters in Mississippi and throughout the South. The organization's activities culminated in the Mississippi Freedom Summer of 1964 and in the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party Challenge to the party establishment at the Democratic National Convention in the same year. Mr. McDew has worked as a teacher and labor organizer and has managed anti-poverty programs in Washington, D.C. He teaches classes on the history of the Civil Rights Movement and serves as an academic advisor at Metropolitan State University. Please welcome Chuck McDew.
Very good to be here. There's a movie out that I want you all to see, which deals with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee that we all refer to as SNCC. And it deals with our efforts to register voters in Mississippi. We came about at a time when we grew out of the sit-ins. We came about at a time when the governor of Mississippi used to say, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. And he threw down the gauntlet and we picked it up and slept. But in doing that, picking it up and slapping it, most people, especially young people today, just sort of take for granted where we are, how we got here. I think if you see the movie we just made last year, you get some understanding of how this all came about. The movie, as I said, the name of the movie is called Freedom Song, and Danny Glover is in it, and Marcella Shannon, and a lot of people. So this, I think you should get it. You can get it at Blockbusters. You can rent it, and it's well worth seeing. I'll tell you some of how it came about. We're very proud of it, and it took a long time to make it. And it started out close to 15 years ago in getting this done. How many of you have seen the movie Mississippi Burning? Okay. When that movie came out, we hadn't been together, those of us in SNCC, hadn't been together for the most part for close to 30 years. When we left SNCC, we went our separate ways. And when the movie came out, when Mississippi Burning came out, we talked about that. And I got together with a friend of mine, Bob Moses, who was an old SNCC person. And we said this is a bunch of lies. And it's an unfortunate thing that they put this movie out because they sort of presented it as sort of a docudrama. And we didn't want people to think that this is the real history of how things came about. And so we went and talked to the people who produced the movie. and said, you know, it's misleading, and you should change it. It seems like from this movie that the FBI was the heroes of that time, when in fact the FBI was our enemy. The real heroes of that time were the people who stood up and counted people who suffered, the local black people who really pushed the movement forward. And so you should change it, at least put a disclaimer at the end saying that this is fiction. And the guy said, "You're who?" I said, "My name is Chuck McDew." And "This is who?" I said, "His name is Bob Moses." And he said, "Like, so who are you?" And it said, "The very fact that you don't know who we are indicates that you didn't do any research in putting this thing together. It's just sort of like a good old buddy movie where a couple of, you know, the poor darkies are being burned up and killed, and a couple of brave white men come along to save the day." Said that was not the case. And the story of what really took place isn't being shown in this movie. So they said, "Well, you know, if you don't like it, make your own movie." In typical SNCC fashion, we said, "Okay, we will." Not knowing what that would entail. Not knowing that it would take us 15 years to get this thing to the screen. But we had at it. And every step along the way in trying to put this movie together, we became more convinced of the necessity of doing it, of making the movie, and that we had a commitment and a promise to movement people that the movie would be made. And how that commitment came about, we were ever mindful of. While we were making the movie, at one point, there's a scene in the movie where we're all in this jail in Macomb, Mississippi. And the guy who plays me in the movie, a guy named Stan Shaw, Stan came up to me and was saying, "Chuck, I'm having trouble doing this part. And everybody says this is an important part, because what it was dealing with, we had to come, pardon me, to an acceptance of our mortality in order to work in Mississippi. And for every one of us, that acceptance of dying, of the possibility of dying, happened at different times. And so I said, at this particular point in the movie, the scene we're trying to do, was one of those times where I came to that acceptance for me. You know, I was like 17, and we had all been arrested, and we were in the basement of the city hall in jail late at night. And Stan was saying, "Well, help me. I mean, how do I play this?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what happened. How you express that, the feelings, I don't know." So we were in jail, and the police were coming and getting us. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and the police came down, and first they took Bob Moses, then they took away. All the SNCC members were in this jail, all of us. The entire organization had been arrested Mississippi, 1961. And when they took Bob away, and he said, you know, that's it. And so I said to the rest of the other guys, I said, look, we aren't all going to make it tonight. We aren't going to make it to the end of the 5 years that we had promised we'd do when we started SNCC. SNCC, one of the most valuable things I think we ever did in SNCC was we planned the death of the organization in its morning. We said that SNCC would only last for 5 years, and then that was that. And we did this saying that several things were going to happen. One, we couldn't last more than 5 years. You couldn't take that day-to-day pressure. And the other reason we said the organization should die in 5 years, we didn't want to get into a struggle to perpetuate the organization. And we felt if we just said we'd only have to do this for 5 years, we could be as radical as we wanted to be. But that night, I was saying we aren't all going to make it 5 years. Some of us are going to die. Some of us are going to die tonight. And the only way to make our deaths meaningful is that those who live have to promise those of us who are about to die that we will spend our lives telling the story of why we did what we did. It's a part of that commitment that brings me here tonight. It's a part of that commitment that has me teaching the history of the civil rights struggle in my job. So Stan was asking me, well, what happened to you? I mean, what was happening? I said, well, you know, after we talked, as we were talking, they came and got another one of our members and took him out. And this kept happening until I was the last one left in the cell. And then they came and got me, took me upstairs, and there was a group of men, a group of white men, about 300 men lined up on either side of the hall. And they, it was like running a gauntlet. And they spat on me, and they kicked me, and they socked me, and they knocked me down. And then they took me to the end of this hall and set me down on this bench. And then Stan, the actor, was saying, well, what were you thinking? I said, well, I was sitting there and I was thinking, I'm scared. I don't want to die. I wish I had never come here. I wish I had never come to this place. I wondered, you know, when they start to kill me, I don't want to beg for my life. Because we had always said at times before that whatever happens, you know, you show them that you are brave to the end. He said, well, I don't feel brave. I feel scared, and I don't want this to happen, but it's going to happen. He said, so what were you looking at? He said, well, I was just sitting there looking at my hands. He said, well, why were you doing that? I said, I was sitting there looking at my hands, and I was thinking, you know, all those thoughts, I don't want to die, I don't want to, beg for my life, and all that. And I was thinking, keep your hands free. You have to keep your hands free. That whatever happens, keep your hands free. And I said, I was looking at my hands. And he said, why? Why were you doing that? I said, because I knew that, I was thinking, when they castrate me, I have to keep my hands free. And then, after it happens, whatever, as soon as possible, I should reach down and hold open the wound so that I bleed quickly, and maybe I'll go into shock and pass out. Well, Stan said, well, how do you know they were going to set Stan? We knew there had not been a lynching of a black man in this country without them first castrating him. That happened in Mississippi. It happens in Minnesota when they lynched those men in Minnesota. I said, so I was sitting there thinking, be prepared to fight, to keep your hands free so you can hold open the wound so you can pass out. I said, and while I was sitting there looking at my hands, I realized that there was blood on them. Blood was dripping on my hands. And I was so deep into my thoughts, I didn't realize it was my blood. I was bleeding from the eyes and mouth and nose. I was so deep in thought. I was just sitting there looking at my hands and saw this blood. And then I looked, and this man, I didn't realize before, was standing in front of me with a noose. And he was hitting me across the face and saying, you son of a bitch, you son of a bitch, you'll never marry my daughter, you'll never marry my daughter. And I said, what? I don't even know your ugly ass daughter. I mean, you know, I'm sitting here thinking about dying, and he talking about that ugly thing he brought in the world. I sort of laughed. I started laughing, sort of hysterically, because I was thinking, this man who I have never seen, his daughter who I will never see, this man is prepared to take my life on the basis of protecting his daughter. I said, it's so insane. It's just so crazy. It's just, I mean, anybody who would think that way, I mean, we cannot survive these people. And yet, I can't leave. If I do live, I have to stay here. I have to keep fighting. Because, I mean, it's just beyond logic. I mean, these are really sick people. And if I continue to struggle, and we do, then it's true. There probably won't be any of us survive. But you can't leave it. You have to stay with it. That was, so told us, Stan. One of the things that happened after I did that, I mean, I like grabbed the man's wrist and said, you know, get away from me. But the important thing was, that night I accepted death and the illogic of it, and that it was going to happen. And I wasn't afraid. I was never afraid to die from that moment to this. I mean, this said you live in a place that crazy that it was going to happen. So Stan went and part of it is cut out of the movie, but part of it is in it. If you get Freedom Song, you'll be able to see what happened and how I survived and some of the rest of us survived. But a lot of us died. Part of the thing we wanted to show in that movie was that, the Mississippi burning was about, 3 guys died. And white guys rode in and saved the rest of us. And we said we weren't even going to deal with that part. We weren't going to deal with when Goodman, Cheney, and Warren were killed, because we had lost so many people before that. We lost in our organization. We started out with like 16 of us. There are 5 of us alive today. And the others died. Horrible deaths. And it just happened. And it wasn't until somebody white died that it was even talked about. So this movie, Freedom Song, deals with the time before. The time before Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner died. And it tells the story of people involved in the struggle and how we came to do what we did. I'm from, I come from a place very much like many of you come from. I was born in the north, in a place named Massillon, Ohio. As you mentioned, in Massillon they raise, they manufacture steel and raise football players. Big football plant down. Alan Page couldn't have made the team in Massillon the year he graduated from high school. But the other two people playing positions ahead of him both became All-Americans. You might know, Tommy Hannon, who used to play for the Vikings, was from Massillon. Massillon's about 30,000 people. About 4,000 of them are black. And you work in the steel mills, and that's what you did in Massillon. And I was one of Massillon's little hotshot football players. And my life was, in my mind, was all set up. When I knew what I was going to do from the time I was in 9th grade. I would play football, go to college at Michigan. In my family, that's how we do it. You go to either Michigan or Ohio State. And then you beat up on the local teams like Minnesota and stuff like that. So I was cool. I was going to play ball, go to Michigan, finish, go into the pros, play pro ball for a while, then, retire and buy a liquor store, used car lot, or whatever they do. And everything's gonna be wonderful. That's how it was set up in my mind. The problem came when my father believed that we should all go to school in the South for at least 1 year. All me, my brothers, my sisters, my cousins, we all had to do that. Eventually, most of us graduated from northern universities, but the first year you go to a black school, historically black school. That was it. Quote, I'm gonna pay a quarter for you to go to school, boy. You going to school down south. I don't care what you do after you do your year, but your first year is gonna be down south somewhere. I went to school in Orangeburg, South Carolina State College. When I went to South Carolina State, I had never been further south than Columbus, Ohio. And I'd gone to Columbus, Ohio on a recruiting trip as they tried to get me to play ball with the Buckeyes. So I went to Orangeburg, South Carolina, and it was a different world, a world that I never really adjusted to. When I first got there, I was really impressed because, I lived in a town with maybe 4,000 black people, and probably 2,000 of them cousins and stuff like that. So I had never seen so many black girls in my life. I mean, in one place, there were all these black girls. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I said, yeah, Mom, man, he's probably pretty good man. He's all right. He said, my daddy knows what I need to do to be educated. I said, bless him, right, Daddy. Like fox in the hen house, It tossed me in there and said, I'll be back to get you later. Said, fine. It was beautiful. I saw black teachers I had never seen. I mean, I had lots of black, everybody was black. I had never seen black professors. Remember, this is 1960. A lot of people don't realize it until the Supreme Court decision in 1954. Black teachers, there weren't a lot of us, and they didn't teach in these regular schools. I mean, my father was a PhD, worked in the steel mills in Massillon, Ohio. was a PhD in chemistry, worked in the steel mill. And that was the dilemma. I mean, it was a lot of black men went through that. A lot of black men who came up here to work on the railroad were more highly educated than any white person that had anything to do with those railroads. But that was the only place we could get in. Well, everything was wonderful until I left the campus. The first time I left the campus, I went to Sumter, South Carolina. I was going to South Carolina State College. And I went home for Thanksgiving with my roommate. And they drank. We went to a party, and they drank and I didn't. So I was the designated driver. And as we were driving home from this party, the police pulled us over. I got out of the car, you know. What's the problem, officer? We had a problem here, blah, 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 blah. And the cop said, where you from, boy? I said, Ohio. Why? He said, they ain't have to teach you how to say yes, sir, no, sir, to white men up there. I said, you got to be jiving. Yes, sir, no, sir, to white men. And he hit me. Now, this was long before the nonviolent movement. And I hit him back. When he took his hand out, by the time he took his hand out of my face, I was kicking him in the heels and knocked him down and was trying to stomp a mud hole into parts of his body. Well, his partner grabbed me, and the three of us started getting it on, and they got the best of it. Broke my jaw, busted my arm, whipped me royally. And as they were beating me, these other guys were just sitting in the car looking, and I was saying to them, I'm gonna get you for this. I'm gonna get you, because where I came from, you didn't let your partners be beaten and not help. What I didn't realize, I came to realize it would have been worth their lives to hit a white cop in 1960 in Sumter, South Carolina. I got out sort of easy because, you know, after they beat me, they put me in jail. And when I got out of jail, with my jaw wide shut, my arm in a sling, I went to get on the train to go back to campus, and the conductor said, all right, get on back to the baggage car. So what is it, baggage car stuff? I didn't realize that there was only one car on the train, with generally the car right after the engine, where black people drove, and the rest of them were for white people. Said, not me, sport. Not for my little $12.80 to arrive with caskets and mangy dogs and stuff. This is empty. I'm sitting right here. Sat in the white car, and I was back in jail. And stuff like that kept happening. So by the time I got home to Massillon, Ohio, I had left in September. I came home for Christmas, and my father was saying, well, I said, you know, I can't afford to keep you down there, because I'd cost him close to $3,000 above and beyond tuition for jail fines and medical bills and stuff like that. And said, so I'm taking you out of here. By that time, and the girls weren't looking so fine then. I thought my year of penance had ended. I said, thank God. Yeah, I'm glad that I don't want to be down there no more. And so he took me back to South Carolina, to Orangeburg, and drove me back with these instructions. You keep your bubble cash, it's such, right here until I come back. You're too young to know that. And so he drove me back to campus and said, stay here till I come and get you. I said, fine. But as fate would have it, we were on semesters. And the semester ended at the end of February, and on February 1st, 1960, 4 students at North Carolina A&T College in Greensboro went and sat down at the lunch counter, asked to be served, and they were arrested. That was the beginning of the sit-in movement. Other students took their place and they were arrested. Well, in Orangeburg, where I was, which was like 80 miles away, a group of students came to me and said, Chuck, you heard what happened in Greensboro, haven't you? I said, yeah, of course I have, everybody has. And then they said, well, we want to do that here. I said, well, go ahead and do it. You got to ask my permission. What's that got to do with me? Do it. And they said, well, we want you to be our spokesman. I said, well, no. Y'all don't understand. You and the white folks are crazy. The white folks are clearly plenty. And y'all just as bad for putting up with this stuff. Not my battle. I can count the days till I'm out of here. You know, I got like 27 days and I'm gone. And I need then never come south again. I will not be south. I said, in fact, my decision on where I was going to school was definite then. I wasn't going to Ohio State. I wasn't going that far south. I was headed to Michigan and eventually ended up here thinking it's closer to the Canadian border. But I told them, y'all deal with it. Later that evening, that same weekend, I was reading the Talmud. The Talmud is the Jewish book of laws. It speaks to how one lives one's life. And there's a section of the Talmud that says, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? If I am for myself only, what am I? If not now, when? If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? If I'm for myself only, what am I? If not now, when? And I thought about that. And I thought that those kids in Greensboro are doing things now because their parents didn't take care of this problem before. And it's on us now. And if we don't take care of it, our children will have to deal with it. I went back, apologized to the people, and joined the movement. And we started sitting in, laying in, and just everything. I remember when we first went south, you used to see black men, when white people would walk towards them, would step off the street into the gutter with their heads bowed. I didn't understand. At first I came to understand that it was against the law for a black man to look at a white woman in the face. It was a form of assault, and men went to jail for doing it. Everything. You couldn't go to the parks, the libraries, the zoo. Came to understand that if anything said open to the public, it meant it was closed to black people. And so we started dealing with all these public institutions, sitting in, and all of that. And it wasn't long before Dr. King sent out a call for student leaders to come together at a conference in Raleigh, North Carolina, at Shaw. And so we came from different parts of the country. Dr. King wanted to sort of have the students be the cutting edge of the civil rights movement. And that might have happened, except for one very important thing. Dr. King believed that if you use nonviolence as a tactic, you should accept nonviolence as a way of life. And a lot of us just weren't there yet. We all used it as a tactic, but we didn't know it would work as a way of life. One of the tenets of nonviolence is a concept called satyagraha, which sort of means the force, soul force, the force of good against the force of evil. And the way that works is if I'm beating you, and beating you, and beating you, and beating you, and you do not react violently, it means I can't just beat you, I won't just keep beating you and beat you to death. Eventually, your sense of humanity, I'll recognize I'm beating another human being. And your sense of humanity, my sense of humanity will reach out and mesh, and at least we can talk, we can at least start dialoguing. So that's satyagraha. And some of us say, well, yeah, you know, that work someplace. But if this is America, and a group of black, this is a workplace for Gandhi and India, it ain't gonna work here. The United States is too violent a place. The United States people are too violent a people. We are taught from cradle to grave to be violent. It won't work. And besides, so when Gandhi's followers would lay down in front of a train to protest, the train would stop because they shared a sense of common sense of humanity with the engineer, who would be British or Indian, Hindu, what have you. Said, but if a group of black people lay down in front of the train in Mississippi or Georgia, something like Alabama, that train will run over you and back up to make certain you are dead. You cannot make a moral appeal, we argued, in the midst of an amoral society. Not immoral, mind you. To be immoral speaks to morality has to do with one's sense of belief, a belief, a common belief about what is right. When you move away from that belief of what is right, that's to become immoral. To be amoral means you never had a sense of it. To be amoral means there is no sense of, there is no common understanding of what is right and wrong. So we say you can't make a moral appeal in the midst of an amoral society. America is an amoral society. So nonviolence, which has to work in a moral climate, will not work in the United States. Well, I don't know if it does or doesn't. When we get together in SNCC, or we old SNCC people, we still argue. We have the same argument we had 40 years ago. But at least we said we would do this nonviolently and try to work towards a nonviolent society. And when you can't do it, then just leave and go somewhere else. Whenever you can't pull it off nonviolently, you can leave. And we still argue about that, as I said, 40 years later. But at the time, we said there should be a place for people, nonviolent and violent people. And we created a new organization called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC for short. And we started working, sitting in, lying in, walking in, waiting in, and all of that. And then later, we decided that we could do more since we didn't have much time. Like I said, one of the most interesting things is, as I said, we planned the death of the organization in its forming. So we had to think about what we could do to significantly change this country. And we decided we could change this country in 5 years. In 5 years. And it was really a very simple sort of thing that we said we could get black people involved in the political process. And it was really simple because the way it worked was the way the United States Senate and Congress is set up. Most of the people who are powerful members, heads of committees, get there by seniority. So all the most powerful men who were heads of committees came from the Deep South. And they all came from areas that were predominantly black. The Eastlands, the Strom Thurmond, all these guys came from, so we said, cool. So what you do is, if you get a new racist, a new white racist, say who's running against Stennis, or who was head of the Judiciary Committee, or Eastland, who was head of the Appropriations Committee, and Thurmond, Strong, all these guys. So if you get a guy, a new racist, who is even, will out-race, there will be more racist than the guy who's in there, fine, no problem. Vote for him, because when he goes into the Senate, He's a junior senator. He has no power. And if you can replace these guys who've been there for 30 or 40 years with new people with no power, you could upset the balance of power in this country in a very short period of time. And it won't take that many people to do this. What it takes is commitment and courage, and an agreement that this is what we're going to do. And at the end of the 5 years, we'll evaluate it then, whether we worked or it didn't work. And so that's what, so we nearly, the organization was really nearly split because there was the argument about some who felt we should not get involved in the political process. I know like there were about most of the students from Nashville, from Fisk, Tennessee A&I, in that area. They felt we shouldn't get involved in the political process because politics ultimately corrupts one. And I argued, well, that isn't true. The head of that faction was my good friend and brother, Marion Barry. And I said, at the time, I argued, Marion, that is not true. We might revisit that question. However, oh, by the way, Marion's about to run again. He's going to win again, too. But back then, we didn't even envision us getting involved. I mean, politically, it was just, let's get these people registered. And at the time, there were 2 black elected representatives in the United States of America. Adam Clayton Powell in New York, Charles Diggs in Michigan. That was it. There were no school board members, no mayors, no city council people, nothing. There were 2. Now, for example, Mississippi has more black elected representatives than any state in the Union. At the time we went there, there were 2 lawyers in the entire state, 2 black lawyers in the entire state. I spoke to the Mississippi Black Bar Association last year. There were 12 black women judges. I spoke to a group of 1,500 people when there were none when we came. So, as we said, you just have to have courage and the commitment to get it done. It started off when we went there. I remember when we first drove to Mississippi, and we hit in going to Mississippi, driving through Alabama, we ran into a little black dog owned by a big white lady in Pell City, Alabama. And the woman stopped us and she was saying, you know, oh, it's my child's dog, and this is only companion, and please give me a little something to pay for my boy's dog. Give me nothing. 2 of us were, 2 of this group, the first 4 people to drop out of school and go work. 2 of them were young black ministers, and 2 of us were young black atheists or something. But they thought the 2 young ministers, ministerial students, said, we should, you know, it's only fair to pay the lady. So we only have enough money to get down there, and we don't need everything to buy gas, we don't need all the money we can get. And the lady finally said, you know, y'all keep arguing about whether or not you're going to pay for my child's dog. Y'all stop arguing. I don't give a damn. Because my brother and his cousin, who were the sheriff and the deputy sheriff, they'd take care of you and never get out of Alabama line. And sure enough, that Stark County became the sheriff. And so we took off, just left, lying down the highway. But these people followed us. And yet I'll never forget this, when we got to the border of Mississippi, as we were about to cross into Mississippi from Alabama, there's a big sign that said, the Royal Knights of the Ku Klux Klan welcome you to the Magnolia State of Mississippi. And we stopped, knowing people were behind us. Mississippi had such a reputation. And we were so mean, we were just gripped by fear of going into this place, that we stopped, knowing what was coming behind us. But we stopped, we paused, and then we said, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. And we went ahead, and we started working, and we started trying to change that place. And we knew when we went in there, we talked about it, that there was going to be a price to be paid, and it was going to be a blood price, and it would probably be our blood. Because there were several things we said we'd do. We had looked at what had happened over the years. One thing we said we'd do was that we wouldn't leave when the going got tough. That black people were traditionally driven off of doing things when violence started. We said we weren't going to do that. The violence was going to come, and we had to prepare ourselves psychologically for it, but whatever happened, we weren't going to leave when the violence started. And the violence started quickly. The first, one of the things we also show in the movie was the first dead person, really, that most of us had ever seen. And there was a man, his man's name was Herbert Lee. And Herbert Lee was a farmer. And we had stayed at his home. I stayed at his house. And one day this doctor who used to patch us up, Dr. Anderson, called me and said, Chuck, I want you to come over to my office. There's a body here of a person I think you all know. And I want you to come and identify the body. And when I can still remember turning his head and watching the brain sort of run through my fingers. And it was Herbert Lee. Herbert Lee was the father of 10 people. And it's another one of those things we said we had to show in the movie because it was an important time, not just for us personally, but for the movement. Lee stayed, had 10 kids, and I remember when we went to the funeral, the fact situation was that his next door neighbor, who was white, and who was a Mississippi State representative, said to him, Mr. Lee had tried to register to vote in a place called named Amite County. And in Amite County was 85% black, and no black person had voted since the Civil War, since right after the Civil War. They had had white representatives all those years. It was in the heart of the district that supported Senator Eastman. This man, his neighbor came up to Herbert Lee and said, Herbert, I heard that you've been down to the registrar's office trying to vote, and don't you do that again. And Herbert Lee said, I'm going to vote. He said, I'm telling you, don't do that again. He said that Herbert Lee said, look, I've fought for my country, I've been in war, I've done everything a citizen is supposed to do except vote, and I'm going to vote. Mr. Hurst said, you either promise me that you'll never try to vote again or I'll kill you. Herbert Lee said, I won't make that promise. And he shot him. Shot him in the face and killed him. It was just that simple. Yeah. And that's when we put the movie together, we said we had to show this because that's how it was. Our lives were like that. Yeah. And I remember going to the funeral and Mrs. Lee coming up to me and saying, you killed my husband, you killed my husband. And she was slapping me across the face, saying, you killed my husband, you killed my husband. And I thought, well, yeah, that's true. I mean, I didn't pull the trigger, we didn't pull the trigger, but had we never come here, had we never encouraged these people to register and vote, he would be alive today. And could we do this? And we kept asking ourselves if we could do that. And we concluded that we could and we had to, or things would never change. Or things would never change. And so we continued on. We continued on. We kept working and we kept striving and we kept changing things. And then we quit. We quit. After, for most of us, we did our 5 years and then quit and went our separate ways. But in going our separate ways, I know we made a difference. I know we made a difference. I know we changed the country. I know we changed the country. When you look at it, every once in a while, people, scholars generally ask, when did you know did you feel you were successful? When did you know it? So it was really years later. For me, it was probably in the 70s or 80s when I look at a convention and see all of us, so many black faces around. So when a few years ago when Mondale was running for president, there was a meeting of all the black political types, elected representatives at the Hotel St. Paul. And there were over 6,000 black elected officials that ran the gamut of everything, every office we had. And it was then that I knew we had done what we said we would do. And so it was like we could rest with the thought in mind that we did that part of it. But it's also with an understanding that the struggle continues. I think that our part of the struggle started probably on December 1st, 1955. That was when Rosa Parks sat down and the rest of us, a lot of us stood up. And a lot of things followed that. And those changes came about because of what we did. A lot of things, the women's movement, the anti-war movement, all grew out of what we did in those early days in the 60s. A lot of times, there are times when I hear the young lions say that, well, y'all just living in the 60s. Say, yeah, we're living in the 60s because to not be is to presume that we did everything that needed to be done. That the racism is no longer here. But I would contend that as long as there's racism, the job isn't done. We started in the 60s, and we did part of it all in the 60s. But the job is not done. We considered ourselves radical revolutionaries. I'm oftentimes disturbed when you hear people refer to the radical right. I think it's, they should call them the extreme right. I don't think they should be called radical. When you look at the genesis of radical, it means to change things from the roots, to change things utterly, entirely from the roots. So we considered ourselves radicals, radical revolutionaries, and we were prepared to change things from the roots. All these other movements that came along, uh, the women's movement, the anti-war movement, we feel they wouldn't have really gotten started. Things like, just like with us, things don't just happen. The society doesn't just change because you want it to change. Somebody has to make it happen. And we did our part in making it happen. And we had started from very basic sorts of ideas that I believe that people have the right to run the society they live in. A simple sort of thing. People have the right to run the society they live in. We still believe that. And it doesn't, Martin, Dr. King used to say that, you know, you don't need anything to serve. You don't need a degree. You don't need power. You just have to have the willingness to do something. And doing something means more than just talking about it. You know, if the society would change because we discuss its problems and its solutions, marvelous, then it would have changed. We wouldn't still be out here at this juncture of our lives struggling. If talking would get it done. We used to say that, you know, there's a lot, you hear a lot of people on the left say, well, of church people say, well, you know, I really understand what you're all trying to do, and I agree with that. That's nice. And I feel, Bill Clinton used to say, I feel your pain. And they say, I feel your pain. I agree with you emotionally. So you understand, so you agree with us intellectually, you feel the pain, so you agree with us emotionally, but where's your body? If your body isn't with your intellectual understanding and your emotional commitment, that don't do nothing. If I'm in Decatur, Georgia, and you're in Duluth, Minnesota, talking about, I agree with y'all, keep going. That don't do it. You have to put your body with your emotional commitment and your intellectual understanding. That's what we did. And we made changes. It's, I despair sometimes nowadays when I look at young people and who sort of feel that, you know, well, we communicate, but I don't think in understanding that communication, the communication without your body doesn't do anything. I'm doing a lot of work now in Georgia and South Carolina on trying to help black people keep their land. There was a lot of people in different parts of our community involved in the reparations struggle. So well, that's nice. But I know places where some of us got the 40 acres and the mule. And now they're taking it away from us. Like when that concept came up with 40 acres and a mule, really started where I'm working down in South Carolina and Georgia. Hilton Head Island, when I was a kid, was totally black. The 3 black people live on Hilton Head now. One of them, Michael Jordan, has one of his country homes, which in most black people, gated communities. You can't go there. And those is where the 40 acres of mules started. So I do a lot of work down there now. We're building an archive, a Black History archive in Tougaloo College in Tougaloo, Mississippi, of the history of the movement. In fact, when you rent that movie, those of you who read Freedom Song, that's where most of the profits went. The money we got out of it went to build an archive Museum at Augsburg College in Augsburg, Mississippi. Grab that baby before somebody step on it. Another thing, and so, you know, there's a situation, when we started, it was difficult. It certainly wasn't simple. And I know it's not simple today. That people have to deal with, you know, the issues that you all have to deal with as young people are confusing and tough. But you got to deal with it. That every generation has a torch passed to us, and we have a historic responsibility to do something. There's not a black person in here anywhere else that does not stand on the shoulders of someone who went before. And you ought to be ashamed if you don't carry the torch that they brought to you. That I know we were looking for organizers down in South Carolina, Georgia, and couldn't find any young organizers. So I went to a thing where they had black young people from across the country in a meeting at Alex Hayden's old place down in Tennessee. What's the name? Children's Defense Fund. Lady, woman. Yeah. Marianne Haley brought all these young people together, and we talked from every state in the country, talking about doing something. And said, well, we need help organizing people in Georgia, South Carolina. And he said, give me their email address and we'll get in touch with them. I said, no, son, y'all don't understand. And somebody been out chopping cotton, picking corn, hoeing peas, and trying to keep the little shack they living in from falling down on their head. They don't have time to go to no chat rooms at night and engage you in intellectual masturbation. We need your bodies in the struggle. You need to be paying back in this struggle. And y'all don't communicate with people you don't see. And they don't want to communicate with you know how. They need your help. And I despair. Like, where are the young people? Especially when I think of when SNCC started, we ranged in ages from 16 to 20. The oldest of us was 20 years old when we started. The oldest of us was 20 years old. And a lot of the changes that we brought about that were beneficial for the entire community, black and white. When you think of all y'all, I assume, all y'all have got Pell Grants, for example. When we brought Pell Grants came about because we were trying to equal the education we got, black kids got, with that whites could afford. But not all those benefits went to the black community. I often wonder about who was it? I mean, when the road towards equal opportunity gets filled up with the lame, the blind, the white women, and everybody else, and we get pushed on the side, we only have ourselves to be blamed for being pushed on the side. And part of that, ourselves to blame, has to do with that I got mine, you get yours sort of feeling. Without recognizing, as I said, we all stand on the shoulders of others. And we all have to give to others. I realize, you know, every step I have taken was either paved with the blood of somebody else or the pain and suffering of other people. I keep going, I do a lot of stuff down in Mississippi and South Carolina. I keep going back because I have to remember that somebody did it for me. Somebody scrubbed floors so that I could go to school. Somebody died so that I can go. Yeah. And somebody went hungry so that I could have books. And it's incumbent upon me, as it is upon y'all, to give back. We being black people, got caught up in something that wasn't for us during the 70s, which was that, oh, I'm okay, you ain't worth nothing stuff. And everybody got caught up in this this me thing, and stopped thinking we. That we always, I'm here because I'm smart. I'm here because I'm good looking. I'm here because I know how to play the game. So yeah, half of them up in Stillwater there because they know how to play the game, they think. And speaking of which, the fastest growing thing in the country now is privatization of prisons. And they are being filled with our kids who think they're so slick that they can beat the system. I said, the white man is thinking hard, long, to make this business pay off. And y'all helping him along. Said, I don't see nobody out there, dope selling, cracks, smoking brothers who's sending one other person on and then just aiding in the killing of us as people. And like that new jail in downtown Minneapolis. And don't y'all laugh, you know, when in school, I all the time say, I say to my students, where you from, son? Minneapolis. So, yeah, and now where are you really from? Minneapolis. Where are you really from? Well, I came here from Chicago. Said, which county in Mississippi did your people come from? As you claim you weren't there when it happened. So, as I talked about them coming from Minneapolis, and people are flooding up here because of the great educational opportunities on one hand that we aren't taking advantage of. That's why I say I teach at Metro State. 85% of the black students I see come from someplace else. And it's like that everywhere. All over. We have to pound out a new vision for a new society. And we have to think about that new vision for the new society in a radical sort of fashion. That's what why else are people in school? Except to learn to do things. And why should it be radical is because we haven't finished the job. We did part of it, we didn't do it all, and there is more to be done. In the 60s, we in SNCC helped to set the agenda for the country. It's time for a new agenda, and it's incumbent upon young people in this new century to set that new agenda. Reparations may be part of it. That's not my struggle, because I believe white folks will eat their young before they turn over much money to us. But there are different levels of the struggle that we can all be involved in. As when I was 17, 18 years old, and we looked at the history of where we as Americans have come from, we saw a vision for a new democracy and thought in terms of, in times past, we had been sent off to war in a fight to make the world safe for democracy. and came to a point in our lives when we felt that we would only fight not to make the world safe for democracy, but to make democracy safe for the world. Thank you.
We want to thank you all for coming out this evening and hearing the history that was a continuum in the 60s of really what began 100 years before that, and that we've been challenged with to continue on. I want to thank all of you who've come and who've been with us this evening. There's a group of folk from Morehead State. I want to thank Hannah and their crew coming down from Morehead to be with us today. I want to thank my brother Larry Pinckney, aka Makwa, who's been with us many times before, and for coming out and sharing with him. Brother Makwa, for those of you who don't know, was back in the day in the same struggle. In fact, a member of that legacy that grew out of SNCC, which became the Black Panthers, and that's just a part of the history. I want to also thank one of my colleagues here, Dr. Gary Hesser, for not just participating, but helping in bringing this information here at Augsburg and sharing with. I want to thank my daughter, Jordan, for somehow staying up and being patient with us. And I also want to let you guys know that this Soulful Dinner is the first of what we're going to do annually, but it's also, as of this month, the conclusion of our Africana History Month programs. We do things throughout the year, but specifically during February we focus on Africana history, and this was our closing program. We appreciate all of you who've been a part of the things we've done this month, and we want to let you know that all the information that we've gathered from the forums we've had, as well as from tonight, are available for continuous study. We've taken these things, and so if you want to use them for class projects and for continuing study, we ask that you just contact the office and we'll give you that information. Again, thank you for coming out, and I want to close in the way that we always do at the Pan-Afrikan Center. Let's everyone stand. Okay, now grab the hand of someone next to you, and we close with the sign of Harambe 7 times, holding the 7th one high. Harambe meaning let us all pull together. All right? Harambe! 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 Harambe!